Everyone is familiar with the story of the RMS Titanic and her sinking. Some may know the sinking of the Empress of Ireland and the Lusitania, but the story that I'm about to tell you is regarded as the worst maritime disaster in history with a greater loss of life. This is the story of the Wilhelm Gustloff. The Wilhelm Gustloff was built by the Blumenwas shipyard in Hamburg, Germany. Her keel was laid down on August 4, 1936, and in a span of a few months, she would be launched on May 5, 1937, with great fanfare. Her launch was also attended by the Führer himself, Adolf Hitler. The Gustloff was originally going to be named Adolf Hitler. However, she received a name change in 1937 in order to honor the fallen Nazi Swiss leader Wilhelm Gustloff, who was assassinated in 1936. When the Wilhelm Gustloff was completed, she came in at 684 feet in length, 77 feet in width, and 184 feet in height. She was registered at 25,484 gross registered tons. She came equipped with 4 8-cylinder man diesel engines that were capable of 9,500 horsepower and was able to drive the ship at 15.5 knots. By design, she was able to carry 1,462 passengers and 417 crew. The total cost for the Gustloff's construction came to 25 million Reichsmarks. She would begin her maiden voyage in March of 1938. What made the Wilhelm Gustloff so special was that she was the first purpose-built cruise ship for the Deutsche Arbeitsfront, long for the DAF, and translated into the German Labor Front. She was to be used by the organization called the Kraft der Freude, long for the KDF, translated to the Strength Through Joy program. Her main responsibilities as the KDF flagship was to provide cultural and recreational activities for the German people who were on board her. Some of these activities included cruises and holiday trips. But she was also used to serve as public relations tool to present the Third Reich in a positive way. The flagship of the KDF would enjoy a couple cruises, but as fate would have it, it was not destined to be, as in September 1st of 1939, Nazi Germany had invaded Poland, and thus World War II began, and the Wilhelm Gustloff was requisitioned by the Kriegsmarine. On September 22, 1939, the Wilhelm Gustloff was given the designation of Lazarettschiff D, which translates to Hospital Ship D. Her interiors and furnishings were stripped, and she was then crowded with medical equipment and medical personnel. Beds took their place of the tables and chairs, and the doctors and nurses filled the empty cabins that once held happy German passengers. The Wilhelm Gustloff would dutifully carry out her duties as a hospital ship from 1939 to 1940, until her career as a hospital ship ended on November 20th of 1940. Her once glamoring colors were repainted with a standard naval gray, and she was moored at the port of Gotenhaven, where she would be used as a floating barracks for the 2nd Submarine Training Division until she would participate in one of the largest evacuations in German history. By January of 1945, Operation Hannibal was in full effect. It was the largest naval evacuation of German troops and civilians from East Prussia and the German-occupied Baltic states, as the enraged Soviet Red Army continued to advance, intending for full revenge. Horrors as to what they did to the people have scared thousands of refugees, and their only hope was the Wilhelm Gustloff moored in Gotenhaven. The Gustloff was designed with 1,879 people to carry, and on her final voyage, she would be crammed with 10,000 people on board. To say she was overcrowded is an understatement. On January 30th, 1945, at 12:30 p.m., the Wilhelm Gustloff left the port of Gotenhaven for the last time. On board were 4 captains of the Wilhelm Gustloff. The captains had disagreed on what course the Wilhelm Gustloff should take as they crossed the Baltic. One of them, who was Lieutenant Commander Wilhelm Zahn, who was a submariner, argued that the Wilhelm Gustloff should sail in close to shore in shallow waters, with her lights turned off. However, the final decision was made by Wilhelm Gustloff's captain, Friedrich Petersen, who opted for the Wilhelm Gustloff to sail in deeper waters, which was known to have been cleared of mines. The weather conditions of that January day continued to deteriorate as fog and snow began to settle in. Temperatures began to drop, and life outside the Wilhelm Gustloff became miserable for passengers who were outside on her decks. The Gustloff's halls and cabins were overcrowded and filled with passengers, but everyone had the same feeling in mind. They all felt hopeful that they would reach their destination on time. But little did they know that the ship of hope would become the ship of despair. As the Wilhelm Gustloff continued to travel across the Baltic Sea, she was sighted and spotted by the Soviet submarine S-13, which was commanded by Alexander Marinesko. The submarine shadowed the Wilhelm Gustloff and slowly began to position herself as she followed her. Soon, night fell in the Baltic Sea. It is January 30th, 1945. The Wilhelm Gustloff was sailing in the Baltic Sea near the coast of Pomerania when Alexander Marinesko gave the order to fire 4 torpedoes. 3 of them hit their mark, but the 4th one failed to fire. Immediately, the ship was hit by 3 torpedoes, and immediately after, she began to list heavily to her port side. Casualties had already been commenced from the impact of the torpedo explosion. The Wilhelm Gustloff's lights were knocked out, and the cold night became a pitch black. Thousands of desperate refugees desperately tried to get to the decks to get to the lifeboats, but the lifeboats were frozen in place in their davits. And what was worse was that the lifeboats on the starboard side became nearly impossible to launch due to the severe list to port. In 70 minutes, the Wilhelm Gustloff will be gone. Over 1,200 people survived the sinking, but what is more tragic is that the Wilhelm Gustloff took over 9,000 people with her. And to this day, her story has nearly been forgotten. But to many, she serves as a dark reminder of how cruel war can be and that nobody is safe.